no matter how smart or how powerful, could single-handedly right the so-called wrongs I wanted corrected. I really should have known better on another level, too. Our previous president had been a philosopher, and he certainly had not been able to slow the spread of what I perceived to be Wake's ills. Wake Forest's biggest ills, to my mind, turned on its shift away from the centrality of liberal learning as the core mission of the university. Now, I sound hyperbolic here, and that's not my intent. We had not thrown out the liberal arts baby with the bathwater. Our undergraduate curriculum remained firmly grounded in the liberal arts tradition. But it seemed to me that we taught and worked in a larger university culture, in a larger society, that gave the pursuit of liberal learning shorter and shorter shrift, in theory and in practice. At some level, liberal learning seemed of marginal importance to many of my students, and to the alumni too, who preferred the homogenizing effect of Greek life and the thrill of ACC sports to tackling the bigger questions about the human condition. Liberal learning also seemed marginalized by the clarion calls from students, alumni, and parents for educations that had provided real-world applications, learning focused on utility. Liberal learning even seemed peripheralized by the mushrooming commitment of our university to service in the broader community. As much as I was delighted at this new direction, it seemed to highlight all the more the utility aspect of the educations we were expected to provide. And I felt the university's own promotional language increasingly reflected an insistence that our institutional worth rested on the practical value our undergraduate, graduate, and professional educations provided. But I had done my little part. I had assumed a small private liberal arts college could be nimble compared to its mammoth bureaucratic cousins, the state schools, and therefore my helping to install a fellow historian at the helm could set our pitching little craft back on course for a renewed commitment to liberal learning on the foaming waters of higher ed and American culture. And back I went, have you ever done this? I put my notes to be sustainable on side, front to back instead of one after another, so I apologize. Yeah, it's a bad idea. Yeah, exactly. You're right, Stanley. And back I went to the classroom.
Environmentalism in general.
And back I went to the classroom in my writing. As luck would have it, however, I found myself in yet another unlikely position shortly thereafter, this time as a newly named associate provost. I served in an office full of bright, hardworking, indeed fabulous people. I reported to the provost, an economist, and I worked alongside colleagues from business, law, physics, chemistry, health and exercise science. You're getting my drift here. There was not a humanist among them. I soon discovered that my worldview was not particularly in sync with theirs, as wonderful as these people were. If they were from Mars, I was not only not from Venus, after all those two planets are proximate, I was from Pluto, which you may recall is not even a planet anymore. Perhaps my most important role in that office was to serve as a humanities translator, and the remarks I want to make today that will follow, I hope, reflect the thinking that I brought to the post and the thinking that continues to shape what I do now in my scholarship and my teaching. So while I'm very sympathetic to Professor Fish's position on academic freedom and in an ideal world, I am agreed that faculty should teach their disciplines in the higher order thinking and critiquing that goes along with it and be done with it, because the students, after all, are the ones who make the connections, as I think they so beautifully articulated yesterday. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen because of overwhelming political realities. And by political here, I mean the larger public discourse that has been torpedoing higher ed, and especially humanities, for many decades now. And I mean the political realities of decision-making about the distribution of university resources. And it's not going to happen because of our own internal disciplinary and interdisciplinary politics, which have been and always will be in flux and contestation. The very act of building a body of knowledge within our disciplines necessitates its continual renovation, as it were, the tearing down and reconstructing different parts of it. But to this end, I am agreed with Professor Fish that academic freedom, because I think he's telling us this, is a two-way street. It protects us from outside forces that would inhibit our pursuit of knowledge and understanding, even as it comes with a weighty responsibility to do serious academic things based on our intellectual standards, as Edward Shills writes. I learned a lot in the provost's office, and one of the things I learned I attribute directly to the provost, who told me multiple times that while I might think I'm an idealist, I have a strong streak of the pragmatist. This may just be the historian's cross to bear, as Professor Ayers suggested yesterday, but it also may be my need to find a middle ground. I believe the study of history is oftentimes as much as about identifying middle ground as anything, that shifting political space where different ideas and different cultures come together and reshape into something new. So at least I can find intellectual comfort in my personal proclivity. To that end, I see these times, both within our university and in our larger society, as an opportunity for the humanities to make its case not for our usefulness per se, but for the value of a quality of life that reflects deeper engagement with the central challenges we all face in an increasingly complex and interdependent world. Isn't the humanist's gift the way in which we approach complicated issues in a world of shifting circumstances and agendas that invite our thoughtful interpretation, our thoughtful interrogation, our constant reassessment, our constant rethinking about our social beliefs and values? We heard our students yesterday convey that they had received this gift in spades from their humanities education. And Professor Ayers explained how his Backstory radio program and his university's Mining the Dispatch digital project encouraged that kind of engagement and understanding in the public sphere as well. I suspect all of us in this room are agreed on the value of this gift and what fun that gift is, in fact. But I think therein lies the problem. We have to be careful not to spend all our time talking to each other. Talking to each other is important, don't get me wrong. The humanities faculty at this university in particular had been in dire need of a new means to build greater intellectual community. And we're really beginning to see the payoff with this new institute as it's represented in the groups we've heard from, the reading groups, and what's happening with our conference this weekend. I know it will generate many more new opportunities for shared knowledge building and exchange, and that's important. But I do think we as humanists rely too much on our shared sense of the intrinsic value of what we do, precisely because we do not engage our colleagues outside the humanities and the public at large. I applaud Professor Fish for his willingness to do just that, to engage the wider world in his ideas, and to defend his ideas with a clarity and a kind of elan we should all strive for. And I know that Professor Ayers has built a sterling academic career anchored in the importance of doing public history. In that sense, I have to say that I'm a bit saddened in some respects that our conversations of these 2 days are in-house, as it were, that with a very few exceptions, we have not been sitting next to our colleagues from the social sciences and sciences and from the professional schools, some of whom I think would be excited about the possibilities for finding new connections. I have to think that the non-humanities faculty who worked with our science-oriented humanities students yesterday would have been thrilled and excited and enervated to hear their students talk about the interdependence of their educations. And I know for a fact that the business school faculty love working with our humanities students in their MA program because of their ability to invoke context and be so creative. So let me be clear here. I'm not urging us as humanists to go on the defensive. I do not want to see humanists forced to extol yet again the long string of skills we inculcate in our students: critical thinking, deep analysis, Socratic argument, clear writing, et cetera, et cetera. Instead, I'm suggesting we rethink how to make ourselves more present in the wider intellectual world. By this, I do not mean we need to ask humanities faculty to do service learning in their classroom or to conduct community-based research, nor do I mean humanists should pursue public advocacy on social issues or turn themselves into policy experts. Far from it. Though I think it's terrific if individual faculty members in the humanities choose to pursue those outlets over the course of their careers. Instead, I mean building stronger intellectual relationships with scholars in non-humanities disciplines as well as humanities ones. This kind of connectivity is not possible at most large research universities, but our size at Wake and our long-standing sense of community at Wake lends itself to this possibility. We have seen fruitful beginnings along those lines in recent years, and the students showcased many of those efforts and the significance it has made in their personal and intellectual lives yesterday. The Humanities Institute is in a unique position not only to facilitate, but to institutionalize this kind of bridge building, this intellectual bridge building. Cross-disciplinary reading groups and cross-center collaborations might be one set of avenues to nurture such exchanges, as might conferences for the whole university that make the interconnectivities across disciplines and schools the central theme. What about taking advantage of that glut of talented young PhDs in the humanities who cannot find jobs by creating postdoc positions as bridge builders in non-humanist programs and schools? Finally, can the Institute work with the administration to through how best to ease the challenges in facilitating such collaborations in general and to make sure they are valued and rewarded in tenure and promotion system? Forging these new relationships at Wake Forest and beyond may or may not have larger implications for our contemporary society, but no one can deny there is a crying need for them. The interminable screed about the need to justify the bottom line from our universities, our businesses, and our governments, and their deadened sensitivities to the individual human experience has led even David Brooks, that op-ed magician of an oft-times reductionist social science, to plead for the recognition of so-called new humanism, an understanding and an analysis that spans reason and emotion. What all of us would argue humanists have been doing all along. Martha Nussbaum makes a similar plea in her latest book, Not for Profit. She argues, and I think compellingly, that the humanistic aspects of science and social science, the imaginative, creative aspects, and the aspect of critical thought have been left behind in our desperate race for economic growth around the world. And there's the rub, of course. A strong economy was supposed to be the means to cultural richness and human flourishing, but building a strong economy has now become the endgame. That endgame has turned too many people into yes men and yes women who subordinate themselves to authority at not only great personal cost, but great social cost as well, squelching independent thinking and imagination at the world's peril, which is something, of course, that imagination and independence we have in spades in the humanities. What does this meta-thinking mean for us in the humanities? I think the bottom line for us as humanists is that the other disciplines need us, and they are increasingly recognizing this is the case. They need the rigor and the humanity of our analysis. They need our insistence that the human condition rests on the importance of a rich inner life that transcends material circumstances. And more than ever, and here's where I will conclude, they need our empathetic grasp of human experience in all its complexity, something we've heard again and again at this conference. They need our insights to be able to see the ways in which our work, within and across our disciplines, always gives primacy to the ability to imagine the experience of another. Thanks.
I also want to thank my colleague, Professor Mary Foskett, for inviting me to be on this panel, and I feel privileged to be on the same panel with Professor Stanley Fish and my other colleagues. The question, are the humanities good for humanity, presupposes that there are other disciplines and modes of knowledge to which the same question could be posed. It also invites a comparison of the humanities with these other alternative approaches to knowledge production, such as the social and the natural sciences. That the question is asked at all may suggest that the legitimacy and relevance of the humanities are either under assault or at least cannot simply be taken for granted. However the question is posed or answered, there are some scholars who argue that a teleological question is not what we should be asking of the humanities, or any other disciplines for that matter. One concern is that there is no consensus of what the good is, and even when we can agree on what the good is, it is not clear that it is the job of the academy to facilitate its realization in the lives of our students. And I think I will cautiously include Professor Fish in this camp. The lead title of his book, Aim Low, accurately captures the substance and tenor of his argument. For him, college and university professors should confine their efforts to what they could reasonably hope to accomplish, which is to give students a set of materials and skills and stimulating enthusiasm for the material at hand. Anything else, as he has argued this afternoon, is beyond the skill of the educator, the purpose of education, and will run the risk of turning the teaching enterprise into political indoctrination. This positivist ideal of the academic enterprise is possessed of a long heritage, and Max Weber is probably its best spokesperson. According to him, education cannot help decide which ends one ought to choose and serve. It can only supply objective information in choosing means useful in reaching various ends. To the extent that this is true, the university must renounce the role of in loco parentis. It cannot and ought not to assume responsibility for the personal and social life of its students. An important question to address then is whether the academy is better off by this narrow conception of its mission, or is an expansive objective more desirable? What would this much broader mission look like? And on which side are the humanities in this regard? All these questions could be reduced to just one. What does it mean to be an educator?